gets colder. My eyes go dim as I get older. Pieces, bloody and bruised. I feel so helpless and confused. 'Cause I hear screaming on the left, yelling on the right. I'm sitting in the middle trying to live my life. 'Cause I can't stop the war, shelter homeless, feed the poor.
Good afternoon. This is Evelyn Pringle. Welcome to Trish and Evie's Focus on the Facts. My co-host is Patricia Negron. She is my partner in crime in taking down the global pedophile networks. Today we will continue to cover the takedown of the global child sex trafficking networks with the latest news in the child sex trafficking scandals of Jeffery Epstein and the NXIVM sex cult. The latest news in the NXIVM case is that Dr. Brandon Porter had his medical license revoked last week for performing unsanctioned research on people as part of his connection to the NXIVM cult, according to an investigation by the New York Department of Health. Between 2010 and 2017, Porter performed unsanctioned neurological research on more than 200 subjects to study psychological responses to certain stimuli. For instance, in one research study noted, dubbed the Fright Study, Porter forced his subjects to watch violent and horrific video clips that included footage of 4 women being dismembered with a machete and a conscious male being forced to eat his own brain matter. Dr. Porter, who knew or should have known that human subjects participating in the Fright Study could have been caused mental pain and suffering and or psychological injury while viewing the disturbing and violent actual video and film clips, failed to terminate such study, the Department of Health said in its investigation. The Fright Study was one of many projects tied to NXIVM in which Porter failed to obtain approval from a health research review committee, failed to obtain written consent of the subjects, and failed to inform subjects of the possible risks to the study, and failed to submit reports to the New York Department of Health's Independent Review Board. The hearing committee tasked with reviewing Porter's cases called his studies meaningless and that they preyed on some NXIVM members who expressed vulnerabilities while joining the organization, such as rough times and periods of high stress in their lives. Today we'll also again focus on the Child Victims Act and all the lawsuits that have been filed in New York. The long-awaited act went into effect and prompted an immediate flood of electronically filed New York State Supreme Court lawsuits. The New York court system has deployed 45 judges specifically to deal with the onslaught of lawsuits, including a dozen in New York City, Public Information Officer Lucian Shaflin said. The Child Victims Act, which also extends the statute of limitation for criminal charges against child sex abusers, was bitterly opposed by the Catholic Church and other religious groups and was blocked for years. The act covers victims who allege they were abused as children and teenagers by priests, teachers, scoutmasters, and doctors. According to a report from law firms representing clergy abuse survivors, the Catholic Church spent nearly $3 million to fight this bill between 2011 and 2008. One of the lawsuits targeting the Archdiocese of New York and other Catholic services in the city details widespread sexual abuse of children at a Staten Island homeless shelter for decades, beginning in the 1960s. A plaintiff in that suit claims that a group of nuns surrounded her at the Mount Loretta shelter, forced her to strip, then made her lie down naked while a naked older boy got on top of her and sexually abused her. The 4 or 5 nuns stood around and laughed, the plaintiff alleges in the suit. Several other plaintiffs in the suit described similar acts of torture and sexual abuse carried out by the priests, nuns, and other staff members at the shelter. Dozens of current and former New York priests are also named in lawsuits filed across the state. Also, the governing body of Jehovah Witness is also a target of multiple suits, and new allegations against Boy Scouts of America also include stories of abuse dating back to the 1960s. A group of lawyers recently announced that some 800 men are alleging they were sexually abused when they were Boy Scouts by Scout leaders and other adults involved in Scouting. Other lawsuits accuse former public school employees of molesting students. The lawsuits filed also include victims of deceased child sex trafficker Jeffery Epstein. Epstein victim Jennifer Arroez filed a lawsuit against the estate of Jeffrey Epstein and his longtime associate Ghislaine Maxwell and 3 other Epstein employees, alleging that Epstein groomed her and raped her when she was 15. So far, at least 5 women who say they were abused by Epstein have filed lawsuits against his estate after the pedo killed himself. The hottest topic in the Epstein scandal right now is focused on Prince Andrew and the ties of Epstein and Maxwell to the royal family, which are shown to go back many years, with the Queen hosting parties for the pair of them. For instance, Epstein and Maxwell were among a star-studded guest list at a party hosted by the Queen in June 2000. The Dance of Decades event, which saw more than 600 guests descend on Windsor Castle, marked 4 royal birthdays, including Prince Andrew's 40th. That same year, Prince Andrew was pictured accompanying Maxwell at private parties and celebrity functions both in the UK and in the US. They were photographed together at the wedding of Prince's former girlfriend, Ariel Cecil, near Salisbury in September 2000. They were again photographed together at a Halloween party thrown by model Heidi Klum in Manhattan. Just over a month later, in December 2000, the Prince threw Maxwell a surprise birthday party at Sandringham, with Epstein among the guests. A few days earlier, Maxwell and Epstein had been photographed on a pheasant shoot on the Queen's estate in Norfolk. Prince Andrew and Maxwell were also went on a number of trips together, including to Florida and Thailand, according to an Evening Standard report from January 2001, which claimed Epstein had joined them on 5 such occasions over the previous 12 months. The Duke was also photographed with Epstein in New York Central Park in late 2010, after Epstein had served his sentence. Footage released by the Mail on Sunday this week also shows Prince Andrew inside Epstein's Manhattan mansion around the same time. In 2015, the Duke was named in court papers as part of the civil case against Epstein by Virginia Roberts, and said she was ordered to give the prince whatever he required. Roberts claimed in court papers that she was forced to have sex with the prince on 3 occasions, in London, New York, and in an orgy on a private Caribbean island owned by Epstein between 1999 and 2002, when she was underage. On August 25th, the Daily Mail ran the headline that the Duke of York could be summoned to Paris to help French prosecutors investigating suspected rape and sexual abuse by Jeffrey Epstein. Epstein owned a luxury apartment which featured pictures of naked young women on its walls on the French capital's most exclusive street. Epstein bought an apartment on Avenue Faux in 2002, and neighbors said they occasionally saw him smuggling teenage girls into the building through a side entrance. The Mail on Sunday reports that U.S. authorities have begun sharing information with France's judicial police, who will examine claims that 2 12-year-old girls were abused after being flown from France to the U.S. as a birthday present for Epstein. A source close to the investigation said that the nature of the inquiry allows anyone who might have useful information to be called to give evidence. They can do this as a witness without initially facing criminal action. Prince Andrew would certainly be an obvious person to assist with this. Epstein is reported to have been on 11 trips to Paris in the year before he killed himself on August 10th. Innocence in Danger, the French advocacy group for abuse victims, claimed last week that about 10 women have provided the group with testimony linked to Epstein. In addition to Prince Andrew, some of the famous people who Virginia Roberts claims Epstein forced her to have sex with include Epstein's attorney, Alan Dershowitz, former senator and Disney chairman, George Mitchell, Highbridge Capital co-founder Glenn Dubin, and model agent Jean-Luc Brunel. Virginia also claims that Epstein and Maxwell wanted her to have a baby to be owned by Epstein, and that she escaped this baby-making trap by marrying a man and moving to Australia to get away from the pair. So I'll bring Trish on now to discuss the important developments in these child sex trafficking cases. Welcome to the show, Trish.
Hi, Evelyn. It's really incredible, to me, one of the things, as you're pointing out with Jeffrey Epstein and this connection with Prince Andrew, is that we've seen, the Queen and the royal family attempting to distance themselves from this when, in fact, they hosted Ghislaine and Epstein at, the royal homes. It's like, so don't tell me the Queen didn't know about this, and they're pretending that they told him to stop hanging out with this guy, and it's like they were entertaining him too. They had to know what was going on with him. It's just incredible to me. And one of the other things too, as you pointed out, these are really wealthy, powerful people, and Jeffrey Epstein's supposed suicide very conveniently not only came the day after these names began to be released by the court, but it also came at the same time this new law in New York that you were talking about was passed where his victims could have filed new criminal charges against him and Ghislaine and all these other people, because this case was in New York. But that was all conveniently prevented when he suddenly and mysteriously turns up dead, supposedly. And now the prosecution is moving to close the criminal case against Jeffrey Epstein, and with no further arrests planned.
Yeah, explain that to me. I'm not up on that story, but what are they planning to do?
So this is supposedly the Southern District of New York that wants to, prosecute this and investigate Jeffrey Epstein's death and get to the bottom of it. Yet it is the prosecution itself, not the defense, that is calling for this case to be dismissed, but the prosecution, so that no one will face criminal charges associated with that case.
So who's behind that? Who's behind this wanting to shut down that prosecution?
Well, remember, it was the NY. Yeah, I mean, they were never serious about prosecuting it in the first place. Every time we have seen one of these high-profile cases go to the Southern District of New York for prosecution, which is the court system that this was funneled into, these cases are buried. It was the same thing with the Clinton Foundation and so many other high-profile cases. They get moved into this court system only to get buried. And remember, it was the New York Police Department that allowed Jeffrey Epstein to sell the Lolita Express, which would have all the DNA evidence to corroborate what these women are saying happened, because that's where so many of these orgies supposedly took place, and it would have both the DNA from these hundreds of wealthy and powerful people that Alan Dershowitz assured us were getting massages from Jeffrey Epstein's girls and the girls themselves. But not 2 or 3 weeks before his big dramatic arrest, where they were going to, really go after this guy, they let him sell off the one key piece of evidence that would have decisively connected these people to those girls.
Right.
They were never going to prosecute it.
Yeah. And the same with Dershowitz, he's out here saying, that he wanted this lawsuit. He wanted this lawsuit against him because it would prove that he wasn't involved with Virginia Roberts, but now he's trying to get it dismissed.
Right. And the reason being, who was it? Someone did a really great video about this ploy by Mike Chernovich. I think it was Adam Green. So Mike Chernovich is a conservative, Trump-supporting journalist that, along with Alan Dershowitz, attempted to force the limited disclosure of these documents, okay? They wanted only certain court documents to be shown to the public because, of course, they would have made Alan Dershowitz appear in the best light possible. Were all the documents released, it would have revealed Dershowitz to be as involved as Virginia Roberts says he was. And so the ploy was that Alan Dershowitz and Mike Chernovich were pretending to want to get to the bottom of this and, were supposedly suing to get the transparency. But in fact, they were suing Virginia Roberts, the victim, not Jeffrey Epstein, and they were suing to get only limited disclosure that would ensure the best possible light for Alan Dershowitz. And it's a gigantic fraud.
So Cernovich was in on this with Dershowitz, trying to hide these pictures that would show, really. Who did you say reported on that?
It was Adam Green from No More News did a great video on it. And one of the other things he shows about Mike Chernovich, about how disingenuous this guy is is that, he was on a radio show not too long ago in which he talks about the fact that he was charged and possibly convicted, it's not clear, of a sex crime against a woman, a violent sex crime, and that he goes on and on about how he chokes women, and that nobody teaches you how to do it without crushing their larynx or making them cough, and that somehow this is something women love, in his own words, as foreplay to sex. This is the guy that's going to get justice for these girls who were trafficked as children by these wealthy, powerful people. It's just absurd.
Yeah. Well, this bit about them wanting Guthrie to have a baby, Virginia Roberts, that this goes to, to supposedly the reports out that Epstein was saying he wanted to impregnate 20 girls at a time out on his ranch, Zorro Ranch in Mexico.
Yes, he spoke openly about it with these supposed, leading minds in science and stuff, and they apparently saw nothing wrong with it. It's just outrageous. If this were some guy down the street on your corner block saying this kind of thing, people would correctly label him as, a nut job. But somehow when you have hundreds of millions of dollars behind you, it's somehow acceptable. And that's the other thing is, everything Virginia Roberts has said is corroborated, not only with hard evidence of, photos and receipts and, phone messages, but Jeffrey Epstein's own bodyguards and staff and other victims have fully corroborated all of this. So, she couldn't be a more credible witness. And again, this is something Jeffrey Epstein spoke about himself openly.
Right.
Was running a eugenics program.
This is her account. This is out of this book that she had wrote. She said, this to Guthrie's account, Epstein normally treated her like a dog on a leash that briefly changed once Epstein decided he wanted Guthrie to have his child. After a day of snorkeling in the Caribbean, Epstein told Guthrie that she had made a name for herself among the friends he had introduced her to, and that he could think of nobody else he would rather have a child with than her. And Maxwell went on to describe the conditions of the arrangement. Guthrie would have nannies around the clock, a mansion paid for her in either Palm Beach or New York, and have a hefty monthly allowance. However, her servitude would continue. She would have to travel with the child to Jeffrey's whenever he asked, and she would have to sign a contract that she said she was not monogamous with Jeffrey and that Jeffrey would have custody if the two had a falling out. So this is the deal that they wanted her to agree to. Well, then she went to Australia and met a guy and moved to Australia. Well, they sent her to Thailand, supposedly to have to learn this masseuse class, and she was supposed to bring back this underage girl from Thailand too for Jeffrey Epstein. But she escaped. She met this man and moved to Australia and married him. And so she escaped this baby trap they set up for her.
It's incredible. It's incredible. And we know that, again, this is someone who is moving in circles with Harvard and MIT professors, such as Alan Dershowitz, royalty, prime ministers, the most wealthy and powerful among us, who is talking openly about his desire to do this with underage girls. And here we have a witness who describes that exact scenario.
Yeah. And I thought I had read, or I probably have it in a report someplace, that there's been lawsuits filed against Epstein's estate with claims of these women being his children.
Oh, really?
And I wouldn't doubt. Yeah, and I wouldn't doubt there's probably hundreds of them out there.
Yeah.
It's pretty.
Well, what's also interesting, Evelyn,
Pardon?
What? Go ahead.
No, I said you can go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, what's also come out of this, and is, a really important piece of the puzzle that keeps getting ignored, is that, Jeffrey Epstein was not only protected by law enforcement regarding his prolific child sex trafficking activities, but he was working directly with U.S. and Israeli intelligence in the collection of this sexual blackmail, and the U.S. and Israeli intelligence were using it themselves. So we have state-sanctioned child sex trafficking by our own government.
Yep.
Think about that. That our government is engaged in the widespread global practice of child sex trafficking and sexual blackmail. They were working hand in glove with Jeffrey Epstein. And Whitney Webb does an incredible job of demonstrating how when Jeffrey Epstein moved into that mansion, this largest residence in Manhattan was given to this 20-something-year-old college dropout by, Les Wexner out of the blue. And it just so happens to turn out that this house, before Jeffrey Epstein moved in, had already been wired for sexual blackmail. It had a bathroom under the stairs that had leaded walls, and then a closet inside which there were monitors connected to cameras inside all the rooms. Jeffrey Epstein himself declared that in a statement that in the 80s he worked with the CIA. Alexander Acosta confirmed in a public statement that Jeffrey Epstein belonged to quote-unquote intelligence. In the court documents themselves, they say that Jeffrey Epstein cooperated with the FBI. And then Whitney Webb does even more documentation of his ties to U.S. intelligence, and nothing else would explain how the guy was given complete freaking immunity from child sex trafficking charges to begin with. And Ryan Dawson does a really great job of this. There's also an article in the Duran called "The Genie in the Bottle," I think is what it's called. It's about how Jeffrey Epstein was directly involved in orchestrating the Wall Street theft of trillions leading up to the 2008 financial crash. And this was at the same time he was negotiating this freaking illegal plea deal over the child sex trafficking. So what I'm realizing is that, they used a market crash last time these explosive, scandalous revelations came to public awareness. And they're trying this fake suicide to shut it down, but there's clearly, we are on the path to another financial collapse, and it could very well be brought about this year as a way, again, to distract from the scandal of these revelations that just keep mounting and won't seem to go away. So, especially given his direct involvement. And then Jake Morphonius also does a really great video that ties together all these people in Trump's administration that were meeting with Jeffrey Epstein and were directly involved in the fraud of the 2008 financial crash. So I think it's not unreasonable to expect that we could have something like that occur again, because Jeffrey Epstein was apparently meeting with all these people in the months leading up to his arrest.
Sure, plotting it out. He probably knew. I don't think he knew when he was going to be arrested, because I don't think he would have came back if he had known he was going to be arrested at that airport in New Jersey.
Yeah, maybe not. But he definitely knew he was going to be arrested. He would not have sold that plane otherwise. And remember, the other thing is that, the police and the FBI didn't raid any of his properties like they did the New York home, but they didn't go to, the New Mexico or St. James Island properties until weeks after he was arrested.
Oh, I know. They just raided that, what was it, last week or the week before? The pedophile island, months after they should have.
Yeah, exactly. They were never serious about prosecuting this case.
Yeah. Now today there's a report out that says Prince Andrew willing to talk to the FBI over relationship with pedo.
Oh,
Jeffery
please.
Epstein. Yeah, right.
As if that will amount to anything. They're not going to charge him. They just want to know what he knows. And then they'll, add to their own little sexual blackmail book with that.
Yeah. Right. And then and then there was people that resigned from the MIT Institute because of money that they accepted from Epstein. I have to find that story.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's good news. Harvard is refusing to refund the money that a child sex trafficker and eugenics advocate gave to them.
No, they won't return it, eh?
No.
I'm looking for that article on the. Oh shoot, I don't know. And also there's a New York Times reporter. I had a story on that too that took a $30,000 loan or something, or some kind of investment from Epstein, and I guess he quit the New York Times now.
Oh wow.
Yeah. This stuff never stops, and this stuff happened after he was arrested. These incidents with these people took money after he was prosecuted, so it wasn't like they didn't know he was a pedophile when they took the
exactly
money.
Exactly.
But that I'm trying to find that. Only here was Prince Andrew took a flight on Epstein's private jet, Russian model. In 1999, see, this goes back before 2000. Prince and Anna Malova were among 9 people on previously undisclosed flight from the U.S. Virgin Islands to Florida. Andrew and Anna Malova, then 27, were among 9 people on Epstein's plane for a trip from the U.S. Virgin Islands to Florida in 1999. And Malova was later jailed in the U.S. for failing to comply with court-ordered program relating to her use of prescription painkillers. They're just all over the place. And then there was another headline, Prince Andrew seen getting foot massage from young woman at Epstein's apartment. Never ends.
Gosh.
Never ends.
Well, you also mentioned those illegal human experiments. Not only Jeffrey Epstein got off for sexual blackmail operations using children alongside U.S. law enforcement, but the Claire Bronfman, whose father is tied directly to the sexual blackmail operations run by Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein. Edgar Bronfman and Robert Maxwell were, colleagues in Israeli espionage. And so Claire Bronfman, she was running, according to, the investigation, a sexual blackmail operation, and she was blackmailing 5 judges, Chuck Schumer, and all these other people. She also walked on these charges of child sex trafficking, and she had funded NXIVM to the tune of $100 million. If that's not culpable, I don't know what is. In addition, she funded that guy, Dr. Porter, to the tune of $30 million. And these were these experiments, these trauma-based experiments that he was doing, are this exact kind of practices used by the CIA to in their MK Ultra and other programming practices that they've used on children.
Yeah. This is so scary how far they've gotten with this before we stop them.
Yeah. But yet it's, again, Claire Bronfman walked away. She still hasn't spent any time in jail.
$6 million fine. Big deal. What is that to billionaires?
Yeah. No, that's nothing. And as you pointed out, Evelyn, she's continuing to do what she was doing all along, just as Jeffrey Epstein did throughout the, prosecution of his original case. He was having those 12-year-old girls delivered to him as he was being prosecuted for child sex trafficking.
Right. And I wonder if it's that modeling agent. What the heck's his name again?
Jean-Luc something or other?
Yeah. If he's the one that delivered those girls to Epstein, because his name keeps coming up in that article about the French investigating the ties to Epstein.
Yeah, because he was on the record. Yeah, he was on the record for delivering a lot of those girls. Like, there were, I read a bunch of, phone messages from him about, specifically girls he would have delivered to Jeffrey. So I wouldn't be surprised at all.
No, and like we talked about, I don't know why this Maxwell is running around free as a bird. She's a child rapist. I mean, forget about that she's a recruiter. She's a child rapist. I mean, I'm reading through this Virginia Roberts, I don't know what it's called, this, I don't know what it is. It's like a diary, but it's like a book, but it explains everything. And Maxwell is involved in all of this stuff. I mean, she describes these acts of Maxwell teaching her to service Epstein, and Maxwell is in on all the way.
Yeah,
she is raping these girls.
She sexually abused the girls too. Yeah, and Sarah Kellen off, jet setting around the world. That's why they faked Jeffrey Epstein's death, was to just shut the criminal case. That's right. And now
Sarah Kellen. Now she's like one of his recruiters. Now, how old was she when she came on to Epstein's stable?
Wasn't
a really
she
underage
good question.
to begin with?
I think
she
so.
was.
Yeah, I think so.
And so now they just call her. I mean, isn't she the one that's married to a NASCAR driver or something?
Yes.
Race car driver. Yeah, I wonder how he likes this. These men have no pride whatsoever.
His wife used to sex traffic children to billionaires.
Yep. Yeah.
He must be so proud.
Okay, I came across this article about, it was New York Times reporter Landon Thomas Jr. solicited 30,000 donations from Jeffrey Epstein in 2017.
Wow.
Donation from Epstein to a Harlem Cultural Center. He was asked by his editors last year to interview the convicted pedophile about a tip that Epstein was advising Elon Musk on Telsa. Thomas, a financial correspondent who worked for the Times for 16 years, did the sit-down with Epstein, a longtime source of his. Then he disclosed to his editor, David Enrich, that he asked the multimillionaire for the massive donation in 2017. So anyhow, he's been done. So...
Yeah.
Anyhow...
This operation dates back decades. And it's, again, Whitney Webb did an incredible 4-part series on the history of this sexual blackmail operation, which was handed down to Jeffrey Epstein from Roy Cohn and Adnan Khashoggi. And you remember Adnan Khashoggi was directly involved in Iran-Contra under George Bush. And he was the one with that yacht that had the operating theater and the morgue on it, the 300-foot yacht. He was also...
With the morgue on it?
It has a morgue on it. Donald Trump bought this yacht from Adnan Khashoggi, or after Adnan Khashoggi died. And that's how we know about this morgue. And it's just like, what the hell would anybody put a morgue on their yacht for? There's no explanation for that.
Is that for organ harvesting?
Yes. That's exactly right. It has this, you could argue that the operating theater was there because, they wanted to ensure the privacy of the family should anyone need any surgery, so that they could, go out to see and have a medical team flown in and all that other stuff. You could totally convince me that a billionaire would do that. but you cannot give me any legitimate explanation for why there would be a morgue on there.
Has anybody explained that?
No.
Oh.
And so, and Adnan Khashoggi, we know, was money laundering the Iran-Contra money and smuggling weapons and drugs for that operation under George Bush. So,
and children.
This is a whole organized crime syndicate that has been in operation and fully functioning for generations. And, it explains why our world is the way it is, because these people have been blackmailing systematically all of our, elected leaders and government officials and, in order to serve their own interests. And it's why we have government without taxation without representation at this point. Those government officials are not representing us. They're representing their blackmailers and corporate sponsors.
Well, right. And we talked about last week how Ghislaine Maxwell gave a talk at a Massachusetts school just this past January.
Yeah.
They're putting the pedophiles right in our schools.
Right, and for the principal to not even have done a basic search to discover her association, decades-long association with an accused child sex trafficker, shows incredible, not only a lack of responsibility, but just carelessness of.
Well, right, like you said, Rockford School Superintendent Rob Lebo confirmed Maxwell's presentation, but told the Globe they had no knowledge of her ties to Epstein. This is in 2019, when Maxwell's ties to Epstein have been all over the media for the last 10 years.
Right, exactly. I mean, they're photographed together all the time.
Yeah. And so we don't even know where she is now. They say that she's living with CEO Scott Bergerson in this $3 million oceanfront home in Massachusetts. And then we see her with her fake photograph out there in the In-N-Out Burger in California the next day after this article came out.
Right. Well, the CEO you mentioned is on the record saying that he is not dating her and she is not living with him.
Oh, yeah, right. But the neighbors said that he's seen him out there walking her dog and all this stuff a bunch of times.
Oh, wow. Well, maybe they broke up and he was making the statement regarding the present tense and not historically. So, yeah. I don't know.
Well, they're all out there, I mean, my boyfriend's mother, I was over talking to her about the Epstein scandal, and I was saying about Prince Andrew. She said, yeah, but he denies it ever happened. And I said, of course he denies it ever happened. Every single one of them says that.
What would you expect him to say? Yeah.
But I didn't have the information like I'm talking about today, about, how they broke down about all the places that the Queen has them out there, her out to the castle for birthday parties.
Yeah.
Oh, this is so insane.
Well, but, and again, the hypocrisy of her, making these statements about how upset they are regarding his affiliation with Jeffrey Epstein. She herself awarded the highest medal of honor to none other than serial predator Jimmy Savile, who spent lots and lots of time around the Queen and Prince Charles before it finally came out that the guy had abused hundreds, if not thousands, horrific sexual abuse of children. You mean to tell me she didn't have her staff was not able to uncover that kind of stuff about him before, when they vetted him?
Oh, right. And I think he got an award from the Vatican, too, Savile.
I believe it. Well, the Vatican is a den of pedophiles, too.
Now, I know that in Epstein's house, that he had a picture of him shaking hands with the Pope. And I don't know which Pope it was. It's not the present Pope. But yeah, there he was shaking hands with the Pope.
Incredible. It's
All the
just
perverts stick together there, Vatican.
yes, they sure do.
Yeah.
Yes, they sure do.
So, but yeah.
That's another.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, again, you never see these people punished, and the Vatican is another example of that. Just last year, there was this massive child grooming, rape, and pornography ring run on church property was busted, and no one went to fucking jail.
I know it. Yeah,
they used whips and other sadistic methods raping these children. They recorded the rape on church property and then distributed the material around Catholic church property.
Sure. Well, David Icke says that Princess Diana knew about this stuff with Seville. Well,
I've seen pictures of her shaking hands with him and smiling, and that's why I was like, wow, that kind of surprised me. Maybe it was before she knew the deal, but...
Well, probably because they said that he was serving as Prince Charles' mentor with him and with Princess Diana and Prince Charles when they were having difficulties.
How disgusting, like, of all people. And then again, for the Queen to feign, irritation and embarrassment of Prince Andrew's affiliation with Epstein. I mean, like, what a fucking joke.
Oh, I know it. And the thing about it, too, this isn't stressed enough. Like when I was writing down the summary today, I added about when they said that Virginia Giuffre was forced to have sex with Prince Andrew. They say the places, but they don't say that on the island it was an orgy with 11 underage girls that Prince Andrew participated with down there on the island. I mean, this stuff is so horrible, but only half of it gets reported.
Right. Yeah, that's the thing. They're trying very hard, and now with this fake suicide, they have everyone arguing over how he died instead of, talking about the fact that he was running a sexual blackmail operation using children, not only with the protection, but the full participation of U.S. intelligence.
Right.
Under state sanction.
And this is why we can't break it open. Because this is the key. Yeah, this is underlying intelligence agencies from all over the world using this blackmail network.
Yes.
And they picked this horrible monster that says he has to have 3 orgasms a day. And we talked about this before. He's paying with all of this in cash to all these girls. This is IRS fraud. I mean, he said that he needed 3 girls a day. Well, he paid them between $200 and $300 a day. Then he paid other girls to bring girls in, and he would pay each of the girls that the girls brought in $200 each for those girls. So just say it's $1,000 a day. That's a half of. So he paid all this in cash. That is IRS fraud. Where are the taxes? I don't care what those girls provided. He paid them in cash.
Right. That
he should have been arrested for IRS fraud too, big time.
Exactly.
Because he would have had to pay payroll taxes in on those girls for any work that they did to him, no matter what work it was. But he didn't do that. So we're talking about $1,000 a day he was dishing out in cash, not paying taxes on.
Right. No, that's a really good point. I mean, the whole thing, it's not going to stop until we do something about it, and what they want most is for us to stop talking about it. And remember, it was the very same man who covered up Jimmy Savile's, career, decades-long abuse of children, who is now the CEO of the New York Times and doing his damnedest to cover up this whole child sex trafficking operation, too.
Yeah, and wasn't he the one, too, that put out an article slamming Pizzagate like it wasn't real?
Yes. They were the ones that led the whole effort to debunk, at the New York Times, to debunk Pizzagate.
Sure. Sure.
Which is what we're talking about is Pizzagate, this child sex trafficking by the wealthy and powerful. That is what it is.
Right. That's just the code word for Pizzagate because it's all of this. It's all involved. They're all involved together. And that's the same reason why in my summary, why I bring up that case about the nuns, abusing children. Because it's not just the priests and the bishops and everything. The nuns are in on this too in the Catholic Church. And this has got to stop. And I want to see some of these nuns arrested. My God. Have been participating. And they do the same thing. Them nuns, they go have all these kids and everything. So it's the same trick that Epstein's doing and Nexium's doing, having all these babies.
Yep. And then they sell them. The church sells them. That's the other thing. The Catholic Church, is probably the oldest child trafficking organization in the world. They've been stealing and selling children for profit for centuries.
Yeah. And that model, Naomi Campbell, she's a real piece of work, isn't she?
Yes.
She's out there all mad because the media has put out pictures of Virginia Roberts being at her birthday party, acting like she wouldn't have known about this, and people shouldn't be assuming that this went on at her party. Well, what the hell is it went on at her party? She had on the very same clothes Virginia Roberts did that she had on where Prince Andrew had his arm around her waist there. What do they think?
Having just met her. He just met her that night. And this is a girl to whom he is not related. An underage girl who he's touching like that.
Exactly. And all the explanations that the royal family put out, there was none that explained that picture. That what was he doing with an underage girl that was flown over here from the United States?
And it was in Ghislaine Maxwell's home with Ghislaine Maxwell right there, just as Virginia Roberts said.
Right, smiling away.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, she is a sick individual, isn't she? That Maxwell.
She's
evil.
She was raised for this, remember. Her father was an Israeli super spy who did the same thing. And he was assassinated by Mossad when he got out of line. So this is, she was born into
And besides being a Mossad agent, he was a head of a media empire, wasn't he?
Right. And he went broke and then tried to extort money out of Mossad. And that's when this whole sexual blackmail operation thing was coming together. And he threatened the Mossad to expose their crimes if they didn't arrange to bail him out. And that's when they decided he was more of a liability than an asset. Yet, despite him turning up dead, having fallen off his yacht and washing ashore and being found naked in the water.
Naked?
He was still naked, yes. He was given like a state funeral. He had like 7 sitting and former prime ministers at his funeral. They went on and on about how he had done more for Israel than they could ever have mentioned.
What did he do?
He stole the Promise software from the Pentagon, and it was code that was installed as a back door to let the CIA onto all these devices. Well, he stole the access for Israel. So now Israel has that back door into all of American devices and intelligence. All of the intelligence, this was software that was used by other nations' intelligence agencies, called the Promise software. It was one of the biggest spy scandals in our history, and it was Ghislaine Maxwell's own father.
When did that happen?
I think it was in the 70s, I want to say.
Wow.
The 60s or 70s. And he did other things. I can't remember now off the top of my head, but that was the biggest one. That was considered, he's a hero to them for that.
Oh, for stealing that?
Yes, because it was so valuable. It gave them access to all the spy agencies' data that they were collecting around the world.
Wow.
That's how they're able to blackmail everyone.
Well, what do you think's going to happen to all of the, when they raided Epstein's mansion in New York, when they raided his safe, they said they had all kinds of tapes in there. And like they said, they had tapes that showed it would have a girl's name, say just Virginia Robert, and then would have a guy's name next to it. So I'm assuming the guys' names are the ones that were being blackmailed, and that's his tapes that he had on them all.
Right.
But we're not going to hear more about that, I suppose.
Well, they're not going to do anything with it. They're moving to close the case.
Wow.
They'll use it themselves for sexual blackmail purposes, which is what the FBI is. That's what the FBI and CIA are. They're nothing more than sexual blackmail operations. They cover up crimes. Ever since Hoover, again, the Whitney Webb series is invaluable. You see that the FBI has been corrupted all along since Hoover, when the Meyer-Lansky Mafia caught him in a sexual relationship with another man. And from that point on, the FBI has been an arm of organized crime. They cover up these high-profile, crimes by powerful people. That's their job.
How did they pick Epstein to do this crap?
That's a good question. I don't know. I haven't read through all of the series, and it's not clear to me how. But he also fits the profile of the people that are chosen for these mind control operations and to work as operatives for intelligence, where he has like this hard scrabble upbringing kind of story where his father was missing and stuff like that.
Oh, really?
From what I understand.
His father was missing?
That's what I understand. I could be wrong about that. But, and he just kind of came out of nowhere. And I think, this is pretty typical where these kids who are vulnerable because of a difficult home life or something, just like Virginia Roberts, how these girls were pulled in, they're more easily manipulated, and I think they saw that in Jeffrey, and that's how he became their guy. He was able to pull off the kind of scams that they needed to. And remember, very early on, Jeffrey Epstein worked with that guy, I can't remember, something Berger, Harsberger or something like that, who was convicted of financial fraud in a scheme in which Jeffrey Epstein was a direct partner. And Jeffrey Epstein got off scot-free. And I think what happens is that, they saw that Jeffrey Epstein was capable of pulling off this kind of financial scam, and they thought he was a guy that could help them, like he did in 2008 with these massive, global financial frauds in which they could make trillions. And that's exactly what he did.
Well, George, we talked about this before, but George Webb says that he was trained as a pilot. That old man Barr, would be Donald Barr, hired him as a teacher at that Dalton school, but he said he really was trained as a pilot in that he trained other pilots and that they were running in the Iran-Contra, they were running weapons and drugs and I suppose children now in the Iran-Contra affair, and that he trained other pilots to participate in that too, and that's why he's flying all over the world.
Well, yeah, Whitney Webb. Again, this is the Adnan Khashoggi sexual blackmail operation is the one that Jeffrey Epstein picked up. And
okay.
He was directly involved in the Iran-Contra. Remember, Adnan Khashoggi was involved in the Iran-Contra, and so was Jeffrey Epstein. And Ghislaine Maxwell herself had her helicopter pilot's license, and there's at least one of the girls that Jeffrey Epstein was sex trafficking, who he paid for her training. She now has her own quote-unquote aviation school, but she was trained as a pilot and likely did these runs of guns, drugs, and children around the world for this syndicate.
Yes. Was that the girl that Epstein bought from a family in either Czechoslovakia or Yugoslavia when she was 14?
Yes. Yes.
Is her name Natovia or something like that?
Natalia or something like that? Yes.
Yeah. He bought her when she was 14, and then he trained her, and so now she has her own aviation company. What are these broads doing now that Epstein's gone?
The what?
What are these broads doing now that Epstein's gone?
Good question.
Like this women pilot.
They're probably, the whole thing is still running, Evelyn. Jeffrey Epstein is just one person. The whole system, I mean, it's a global system.
Yeah, how about his brother Mark? Is he involved in this? Didn't he own the buildings where those underage
yes.
and stuff?
Yes.
Yeah.
Of course he's involved. The whole operation is still running. They just have to, shuffle around some people, and I'm sure they did not miss a beat. There is no question.
Do you even think Epstein is really dead?
I do not.
I don't even.
I mean, where's the freaking video? Okay, again and again and again. Where is the freaking video? This is like supposedly the only suicide in 40 freaking years in this institution.
Yeah. Can you imagine that? Right.
No.
The highest price prisoner in the world right now, and he commits suicide in a place that there hasn't been a suicide in 40 years.
Right. And this is, again, the parallels are really shocking when you look at them, because the defense, ironically, called in this guy, I think his name is William Michael Baden, who is, believe it or not, was old enough to have been the coroner who was brought in on JFK's assassination to contradict.
Yeah.
He contradicted the Surgeon General's report. So Michael Baden helped in the JFK assassination cover up. He is brought in to the Jeffrey Epstein quote-unquote suicide. The only reason he would be brought in is for a cover-up.
Right. Because he's the one that said that Oswald was the lone shooter of the JFK murder.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the Surgeon General's report states specifically that there were at least 2 shooters, as evidenced by the gunshot wound, the bullet wound in JFK's throat where his Adam's apple was, and the bullet hole in the windshield that was directly in front of him.
Right. Well, okay, Trish, our time's up. Thank you so much for coming on. You always have the best information. Okay, people, we will see you next week. Have a good week.
Okay.
Goodbye.
Piece in pieces, bloody and bruised. I feel so helpless and confused. 'Cause I hear screaming on the left.